The primary research that is used by most family practice docs and internists and gynecologists is based in faulty research that we have known is faulty for years, and it has yet to be adjusted. We learn to say, no, we're not accepting anything less any longer.
How can we unlearn this of all these decades of bad messaging about pleasure and about sexuality and about owning your own voice?
It's always been about controlling women. Patriarchy is about controlling women, so men get to have the choice and say over her life too.
Welcome to the Hot Flash Health Podcast, where we're dishing out unfiltered truths about menopause with a side of sass and a sprinkle of grass.
Get ready to dive into the wild world of hot flashes, mood swings, and all of the other joys of being a queenager.
This ain't your grandma's podcast. No, we are here to talk our bodies, our fears, our passions, our desires, all while navigating this wild roller coaster ride of menopause.
So grab a glass of wine,
Or three.
kick back, relax, and let's enjoy this hot flash wave together.
I'm Courtney Mamusha, and alongside me is my fabulous co-host, Dawn Fable.
We're just two outspoken broads who like to call it how it is.
Now, without further ado, let's kick off today's episode.
Welcome back to the Hot Flash Health Podcast, and today we are tackling a big one. Move over, Dr. Ruth. We are talking about sex, intimacy, and breaking free from shame in midlife. Our guest, Dr. Tina Schermer Sellers, is a sex therapist, educator, and professional mythbuster when it comes to the ridiculous messages we've all been absorbing about sex. Whether you grew up thinking sex is only for procreation or that desire disappears after 50, Tina is here to tell you that it's all a lie. And better yet, she's here to help us take our pleasure back. So if you're feeling a little lost in the bedroom, or maybe just wondering if you're the only one falling asleep before anything starts, grab your wine, your weighted blanket, and let's get into it. Today, we are going to talk about, are you actually experiencing a low libido or just need better sex? Maybe the wild ways religious and cultural shame show up in our menopause. Spoiler, it's not just about sex. Why we need to stop blaming estrogen for everything and start talking about pleasure. And hey, menopause myth alert, no sex life is over. In fact, it might just be getting started. Welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, both of you. I'm so glad to be here with you, and I just love everything about what you're doing and all the great conversations that can happen around this broad topic.
Yes, us women. We're broad babes. We're broad babes.
That's
A
right.
bunch of broads just talking about sex and menopause. I mean, what gets better on a Friday afternoon if only we had a cocktail in our hands? Which
Exactly.
it's actually it's unusual that Courtney and I don't have a cocktail in our hands.
I know.
at this
I actually
point.
thought about that when I was like, wine, grab your wine. I'm like, I'll be right back. Well, let's get real, right? So what is actually happening to us in our sex drive during menopause? Is it just bad PR out there, or what's going on?
Well, honestly, it's a pretty complex, but also makes a lot of sense once we start talking about it. You know, what actually is going on. So I want to say just out the gate that I'm going to separate out a little bit queer relationships from straight relationships. Okay. Because the people having the worst sex are straight people, and often straight women. And a lot of that comes from this very, very long history of patriarchal religions and patriarchal social structures that put men on top and put them in charge of women in so many different ways. Well, let's just say right out front that good sex is sex where you get to feel connected to somebody you want to be connected to, and you get to share pleasure and fun with somebody you want to share pleasure and fun with. That's good sex. Okay. Bad sex is anything else. Okay. So if I'm having sex that I don't really want to have, bad sex. If I'm doing a behavior,
right?
That's obligatory. Sure.
Obligatory
Right? Or transactional, right? Yeah. If I'm doing something I don't really want to do, bad sex. If I don't really know what I want to do and I'm doing what somebody else wants me to do, bad sex, right? And if you say to somebody, have you ever had bad sex before? Most people will say yes. And you ask them to describe it, and it'll be something under one of those kinds of categories. Okay. So what is the purpose of sex? If it's not, I mean, we're one of the few animals on this planet that has sex all the time, not just when we're in heat, not just when we're trying to procreate. Okay. We have sex a lot and for a lot of different reasons.
Speak for
Maybe some
yourself.
of you.
Yeah, speak for yourself, Dr. T.
Well,
Yeah, speak for yourself.
yeah, that's true. And so then I think we have to ask the question, well, what's the purpose? If we are wired where we can have sex lots of times, what's the purpose in it? And if we're kind of together around let's not do bad sex, then what is good sex and what's the purpose of it? And when you ask this to people clinically, when they're in your room and it's a confidential conversation, they often come down to, well, I want it to be enjoyable. I want it to be fun. I want it to be connecting at the very least. Okay, well, how often is it like that? Not very often.
Vacation,
Okay, well, then
maybe.
we are
like drunk vacation,
Yeah. So
affairs.
Right. So let's talk about what keeps the good stuff from happening, especially in long-term relationships. Well, what keeps that from happening? Well, a lot of times then we have to go back to, well, what did you learn about sex? And where did you learn about sex? And did it ever become obligatory? And if it did, why do you think it did? There's a researcher right now who's studying kind of a topic, and that topic is consensual non-consent. When I say yes, when I really want to say no, but I'm afraid to say no for countless reasons. Consensual non-consent. This has never been studied before, even though this is the number one reason for low libido. I don't really want to, but I don't feel I have the freedom to actually really say. They're going to pout, they're going to do blah, 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 blah. A million things, right? That it's all been built on. Well, the majority of people grew up in homes that were silent or silent and shaming around sexuality, and learned about sex and gender or what I should want or whatever from media. Well, then we have to look at what has media been selling for the last, 45 years, let's just take. It's been selling that women are there for men's pleasure and use. It's our entire economy is driven on exploiting people. If I make you feel bad about yourself, then you're going to buy this or do this or what. I've been exploiting you. We have 50% of 6-year-old girls, 2/3 of 9-year-old girls, and 90% of 15-year-old girls modifying their diets because they have already learned that they're not okay as they are. Okay. So we go about giving people exactly the wrong kind of information for having a deeply meaningful, fun sex life. And by sex life, if I make it anything that connects me and is pleasurable, connects us both and is pleasurable, then I can have a whole menu of things I love to do. So there's menu for things when I'm exhausted. There's menu for things when I don't really feel like being touched. There's menu for things when I feel like an animal. There are menu and menu and menu. And guess what? We don't eat the same thing for breakfast every single day all the time, or dinner or lunch. I mean, we actually like variety as humans. But for most straight couples, there is very little variety in the sexual dance they do all the time. And it's because we didn't prepare them. We didn't teach girls to have voice. We didn't teach boys to study women in the heterosexual world. We taught boys to take from women and then get their feelings hurt when she's like, I'm tired of being taken from.
Yeah. Now, you bring up so many interesting points, and one of which is oftentimes we're growing up with these premeditated values or understanding about sex. And I'm sure you get this question all the time, like, how did you ever find yourself in this profession? But in reading your website and looking at your biography and really trying to understand why you are this dynamic person and have such a healthy passion and relationship and are helping others have a healthier sex life and limiting shame in the household, your growing up actually played into that, right? Which I think a lot of us, for moms and for parents out there, need to understand how we can harbor a healthy home that talks about sex in an open way that gives our future generations an opportunity to really look at sex in a healthy manner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And like I say, 90 to 95% of the people that I have interviewed across the country about what that was like when they grew up told me it was silent or silent and overtly shaming, right? Silence on its own is covertly shaming. Right. And what we know from having studied sexual shame now is that kids start learning about sexual shame usually beginning when they find their genitals. So they're about 11, 12 months old and they're getting their diaper changed or they're in the tub and they find their genitals. That actually is a fabulous day for them because it's in this wonderful part of our body that we can reach most of the time. And it has all these wonderful nerve endings. But the experience for the child is often somebody is there to yell at them, tell them it's dirty, scare them with their face or their voice, and slap their hand away. And the thing is kids don't stop doing that right then. Because developmentally, they can't hold on to like social messages yet. Like that's about 4 or 5 years old, right? So they're going to keep doing it and they're going to keep getting in trouble and they're not going to understand why because they're just doing what they're curious about. That's where shame begins. And then it happens over and over and over and over and over and over again until we're caught playing doctor at 5 and we can remember that one and we can tell you the story, right? Because cognitively we can remember it, but that was not the first time. It had happened hundreds of times before then, usually for most kids. So it is developmental that kids have curiosities about their body and other people's bodies and all kinds of things about their world, beginning at around a year and then going on. And that's why I wrote the Shameless Parenting book, because I had so many people after reading the first book, Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, Erasing Shame from Sexual Intimacy, who said, that was really helpful. Now I know how I got so messed up and what was going on in culture, but I don't know how to not do what was done to me. Like, I know I don't want to do that, but I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And I'm like, I so have you, And so I laid it out, birth to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, all the way up to 18, and just said, we are always developing as humans, and there are certain things that we're going to be curious about at different ages, and certain emotional tasks we're going to be trying to accomplish, behavioral tasks we're going to be trying just naturally as we're evolving. So here's what your kid is like here. Here's what they're going to be curious about. How might that be for you? Ask yourself that. If you find yourself going, I don't know, just put your hand on your heart and say, all that tells me is that somebody who loved me didn't know how to give me what I needed. It's okay. That's shame. I can heal my shame. Okay. I was going to say this, then you literally do what you're going to do for your 2-year-old or your 4-year-old or your 6-year-old. You just read those same kiddo books and you heal that inner part of you as you're doing it with your kids. And then I would say to people, just be 2 years ahead of the ages of your kids. Don't try to be all the way there. Just be a little bit ahead of them. And I'll literally hold your hand through the whole development. And then when you give your kids a different experience, their default is entirely different than yours. And if you're fortunate enough to watch them raise their kids, you'll see it.
So I'm dying to ask this question. Sorry, Court, because I know I've been like monopolizing this question or monopolizing this thing, but Dr. Tina, I have 3 kids, right? I have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 9-year-old. Actually 12, 11 today, and soon to be 10 next week. With that being said, we have a very open household, right? I mean, my 8-year-old daughter, we were watching a rom-com the other day and they talked about a threesome. And she said, Mom, what's a threesome? And I told her, I said, hey, it's when 3 people have sex. Or, my eldest, he and his buddies were on a chairlift and they were laughing that we got chair 69. And they started saying, oh, we got 69. I said, do you guys even know what 69 means? As, if you're going to talk about 69, you need to have it in proper context. So I guess my question to you, and people look at me like I'm crazy, like, oh my gosh, you're telling your 10-year-old what a threesome is, and you're telling, your middle school kid what 69 is. And my husband even, gets frustrated with me. But I guess I'm trying to validate my behavior in my house. Is your best practice for all of us parents who have teenagers or have older kids who are experimenting or wanting to know, is honesty always the best policy?
If you're answering the question they're asking, which sometimes means you need to say, well, tell me more what you are really wanting to know, because I don't want to overwhelm you. There's always a lot of complexity when we're talking about human relationships. So I don't want to overwhelm you. Tell me exactly what you're asking, because I want to answer any question that you have. If you find out, yeah, I don't know what 69 is, and I want to know because I know it's sexual. That's why we're laughing, right? So, but I don't really know. Great. Can I tell you? Are you open to hear? And I often will ask about asking permission.
Yeah.
Do you want me to tell you so that you do know?
What about the kids who like, I feel like I try and talk to my 14-year-old daughter about things like, do you want me to talk to you like how to use a tampon? Do you want me to help you with this? Like what, are you curious about touching yourself? She doesn't want to talk to me about anything. So it's so weird to me where I feel like should be her safe haven and like giving her this information. So how do you deal with that as a parent where kids don't want to open up to you?
Yeah, that's a really good one, Courtney. I'm really glad you asked that, because a lot of people will have that kind of question, and really they're trying to figure out what needle they're trying to thread, right? Because on one hand, you want to be respectful of what your kid wants and doesn't want. But on the other hand, you do have maybe 30 years more life than they have. And there are things you do know that they might need to know in order to protect themselves or whatever. So what I say is try to get, and I talk in the book about the different things at the different ages, but try to be clear about what feels important because it's protective, or protective of them, or protective in their culture, or whatever. And then what I did actually as my kids got older is I would say, like, I remember saying one time to my son, I thought of something today I haven't talked to you about. And I know you don't like to talk about this stuff. So I am going to try to tell you in 45 seconds what I think is most important about this thing I forgot. And my son rolled his eyes in this one incident. He rolled his eyes and he said, just don't tell me any more stories. And I said, you got it. 45 seconds. Here it goes. Ready? Boom. And I just laid it out, and I said, my job as a parent, I have lots of them, but one of them is to protect you. And sometimes that is to show you where the warning signs are so that you see them the first time around rather than the second or the third time. Also, there are things that you're going to be told by your peers that in fact are not true. And if you go ahead and believe them for the next 10 years, it's actually going to make you a bad partner. And I think your sexuality and your heart are some of the most wonderful parts about you. And I want you to know how to live into them in a way that's going to honor who you are, when I know that the guys around you in the boys club are going to be talking about porn as if women are easy to use or whatever. And it's just not true, because I know your heart. But you're going to be encouraged to, yeah, I know. But I want you to have something in here that goes, and I know it's bullshit. Because that part of you is the part of you that's going to fall in love with somebody someday.
Yeah.
And so I want you to be a good lover when that time comes. I want you to know how to study how that person is different from you, right? And not everything you think is all that matters. That's not going to fly. It's not going to make you a good partner. So it's stuff like that where I try to get really clear about the things that were going to help them live authentically in the world in a way they could be proud of, while simultaneously being really aware of, like, I talk about books like Girls and Sex and Boys and Sex by Peggy Ornstein, and I recommend adolescent parents of adolescents read those so that they're aware of what the media is downloading into their kids, so they can help combat that and say, I realize this is there, and you may go to all your friends, and that's fine, but I want you to know in here the outcome of these things, or whatever. Does that help a little bit, Courtney?
Yeah, no, it does. And I really liked your, I know you don't want to talk about this stuff, but let me give me 45 seconds to like analyze it. So I really like that approach, because sometimes, if I give her the option, she's gonna be like, no, I don't want to talk about it. So if I'm like, here, I'll summarize it for you. So
and to be really honest, I got that bravery from listening, because I taught grad students for 28 years who were becoming marriage and family therapists. And they would tell me, I didn't want to talk to my parents about this. And every once in a while I'd hear this story, but my mom or my dad sat me down and said, here's just 3 things I want you to know. And she said, honestly, I will be forever grateful that they were brave enough to do that with me, because I didn't make it easy for them. And so it was those kids, those students, who taught me that there's long range value for don't make them sit for an hour, make it really quick, honor the fact that they're super uncomfortable, but just download the piece you want them to hold on to, quick and easy.
But damn it, I like sharing my stories. Like when you
I know. I know. And for some kids, they really appreciate that. Or, and you'll notice in the Shameless Parenting book that a lot of the core, what we would think of as sex education, so not just relationship education or emotional intelligence kinds of things, but actual sexual education, a lot of that is downloaded by the time they're 13. So in their first 12 years. So really between 8 to 12 is really where a lot of the hardcore information comes. And then a lot of the emotional intelligence, relational intelligence stuff is the kind of 5 or 3 to 4, 5 to 8. And then we get into attraction, having your period, or how, all of the stuff, masturbation, whatever. We're going to talk about a lot of that. And then it's more nuanced stuff as they get older, and they're not necessarily always wanting to share with you. You may have one or two that do, but it's not uncommon for them to be like, yeah, I don't want to anymore.
Yeah.
Then I'm not alone. Thank you.
Yeah. I read something on your website and I loved it that you said this. You said, I want people everywhere to live shamelessly as sexual beings, knowing they deserve connection and pleasure. And that starts from a young age, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
then it evolves into perhaps menopause, right? Which is all about what we're doing here at Hot Flash Health. Because I think as we approach this middle age, we're thinking that we're not deserving of it. We're shaming our bodies. We're dealing with childhood traumas. We're doing all of these things. Our hormones are out of control. So I love it that you are setting out to really spread that mission. But, when you think of menopause and sexuality, so many of us women are feeling like our bodies are working against us in midlife. How much of what we think is normal about menopause is actually leftover shame? And what advice do you have for menopausal women to really embrace this mantra that you have?
Right. Well, those are super good questions. I think a lot of women at midlife are beginning to ask questions they haven't had the time or the insight to ask before.
Or
right?
we've been dismissed, right? So
Absolutely.
many, we're going to the doctor and we're saying our libidos are low or we don't feel like ourselves, and it's just more shame and more dismissal. We haven't really been heard.
Right. Exactly. No. And let me just say that that's real. That is not you. That is real. In fact, I've been doing a ton of research on just how poor women's healthcare and healthcare research has been my entire life. So I'll be 65 in May. So my entire life. And I know this from many, many places, but recently I was talking to somebody and actually had somebody come on. I have an organization called Inanna Rising, which is therapists and physicians who have also gone on to get trained in psychedelic assisted therapy. So I have people come on and do trainings for us. And I had somebody come on women's health in functional medicine. And because there are so many women who don't even know that the primary research that is used by most family practice docs and internists and gynecologists is based in faulty research that we have known is faulty for years, and it has yet to be adjusted. And so I had somebody come on who really has been studying this to be looking at, well, what does work for women at midlife? Like, what's the research really say? And a lot of them will talk about the research of Rebecca Glaser, who is a gynecologist and has done a ton of research. And the research on hormone replacement therapy the accurate research is not known by most physicians. And you really need to get into it to look at, you mean I don't have to feel fatigue? I don't have to feel like I have no libido? I don't have to feel like I want to crawl in bed and take a nap? I don't have to feel like just like I'm dragging all of the time? No, sweet pea, you don't. You don't have to feel that way. But people aren't getting that when they go to see their doctor. Oh, they're being told, they're just being dismissed, and yet we do have options for people. So that's the physiological side, right? That piece. But we also have a piece of us that's trying to heal from the trauma from our lives. Right? We have been dismissed. We've not been listened to. We've been exploited. We've been sold to keep our economy going, right? Women have been tools. And we're waking up in midlife and going, I am effing tired of being treated the way I have. But if I start standing up, what kind of cost am I going to take? But I will not live the rest of my life this way. I refuse. Well, when women were taught from before they were born that it's about everyone else being happy and that they are responsible for everyone else's happiness, they will be burned out by midlife. They will be tired of being that tool. Because the them that is unique, that has never walked this planet before, which every woman is, right? Every person is, right? They haven't lived into that yet. Nobody's been even inviting that out. They've just been saying, you're a role, you're a mother, you're a worker, you're a wife. Now you're a person, right? So we do need to raise our girls a little differently. We need to raise our girls to be aware of self, to know what they think, to know what they feel, to know what they agree with and what they disagree with and why, to know how they deserve to be treated and to have a standard. And if somebody isn't treating you that way, they don't deserve to be in your circle. Right. But that's a completely different message than what girls are mostly given. Right. And boys are given a message that is just as hurtful, but differently hurtful. It's that the only thing that matters to you is what you do, is matters in this world is what you do and produce, but not who you are, not what you feel. Right. And so they learn to exploit. That's what gets reinforced. We ought, if we were raising our kids to meet the demand of midlife, because that's when it emerges naturally in a culture like ours, I should say, that we would be teaching boys to learn about other people. How are they different from you? What is your sister like that you don't like? How do you know? How does she tell you? How does she communicate that to you? Who are other people in your life that are different? How do you affirm that difference? Are you supportive of people? We teach them to learn the other rather than just learn themselves and how to push that on others, which is what we're usually giving them, right? Well, this then makes them a better partner, a better friend, a better employee, a better employer, right? When they understand diversity and difference and they have emotional intelligence and relational intelligence so they can build a community of people that can work together, be together, partnership, whatever, right? And we teach girls. So that's what often men are realizing at midlife on their second or third relationship or family, is that what really matters to me is not what I do and produce, but it's my relationships, right? Steve Jobs at the end of his life, he said, I have everything that people value, and I have been ignoring everything that's important. Absolutely nothing I've been investing in is important, and everything I haven't been investing in is. And I would ask that people not do what I did. Invest in those you love. Invest in your children. Take time to sit with what's beautiful and to soak it in and to appreciate it and to express that, right? Midlife is when men are finally getting their act together and balancing their life because life has taught them the hard way. With women, they're finally saying, I've had it. I'm a person. My life isn't going to go on forever. And I want to do and be the kinds of things I want to do and be in the world. And I'm not going to put up with this crap anymore. Right? But we could be raising our girls to have that skill early on. And we could be raising our boys to have their skills early on. And then what we would see is people partnering around the age of 30 when the divorce rate is 18%, and actually choosing partners where they can have mutual egalitarian relationships and where they can craft sexual relationships that are varied enough to suit their lives and their sharing of connection and pleasure. That's not penetration all the time. It's what's going to work for them that day. And nobody's taking it personally because they recognize they're different and they're in different places and spaces. And they say, yeah, let's just take a bath together and have a glass of wine. I just want to listen to you for a while. And how about I rub your feet?
Sounds amazing. I want that husband.
Right. But it has to be cultivated. And that husband may have taken a shower beforehand and moved through his arousal cycle. So he wasn't feeling drive. He was just feeling the part of his heart that wants to connect with you when you're really there.
So I guess it's hard because from your brilliance, here and like learning and studying humanity, we are all taught these things over the years. How can we unlearn this, right? It sounds like obviously we're kind of in our perimenopause, menopause stage. So we're naturally there because I agree with you. I'm like, fuck this.
Yeah.
I don't need to be this. I don't need to be that. I don't want you in my life. I want this. I think we could become more vocal, but how can we really unlearn this of all these decades of bad messaging about pleasure and about sexuality and about owning your own voice?
Yeah. It's a process of unlearning, just like you're saying, and it's a practice of unlearning. And so I talk about in the Sex, God, and Conservative Church book, I talk about healing the mess, the model for erasing sexual shame. And I talk about frame, name, claim, and aim. Frame is start by getting yourself a scaffolding or a framing of real sex education. So it's going through the book Shameless Parenting. It's reading, I don't know, Wild Feminine, which is a book about just the incredible magnificence of a female body. It's Emily Nagoski's book, Come As You Are. It's getting yourself real sex education and body education so that you understand how magnificent you really are. That is going to come with grief because you're going to see how you've been played your whole life. So you're going to have grief and feelings about that, and you're going to need to move through those. I mean, that is real, right? But you're also going to be learning, wait a minute, I really am more than I've been told I am, right? And so that's frame. Name is tell your story to at least one person who can hear it with love and compassion. Because what you're going to find out if you do that enough is that you're not alone. The vast majority of people grew up under patriarchy with these kinds of messages that have only been hurtful in how they do intimate relationships. And not just intimate as in sexual, but intimate as who's in my inner circle. Because if I have believed growing up that I really was somehow perverted, gross, whatever, then I learned to put on a mask. And that mask is what I presented to the world. And so when people love me, they're loving the mask because I believe if I took the mask off, they couldn't possibly love me. So that is interrupting my ability to do authentic attachment where I feel safe. So giving love and receiving love has been hurt. And guess what? That's the place where our happiness comes from. How well did we feel loved? How well did we love? Right? So a lot of this work is it's kind of slow. We're going to frame, we're going to name, we're going to tell our story. We're going to claim our body is good, even though we have all these little ones that are already modifying their diets, right? We've got 50% of 6-year-olds and 90% of 15-year-olds, right? Modifying their diets. So this goes way back for us, but doggone it, if I get to get up in the morning and I am not filled with pain, racked with pain, it is a good day. And this body is darn good because it is the pen I write the poetry of my life. And I am going to hell bent write the poetry of my life. Right? This body is good. I often say to people, I'm a Swede. I look like all my relatives. I am built to survive famines. That's how my body is. My heredity, your heredity determines your body more than anything else. And yet we don't sell that message because we can't make money on that message. Mm-hmm. Right? So we sell instead a false message that is not true. Even the calories in, calories out diet industry has been made up of bull, the entire piece to sell it. It's not based in what we now know about metabolism and the complexity of metabolism. It's been a hoax the whole time. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of undoing. It's listening to podcasts like yours, listening to other podcasts that take apart the diet industry or whatever. It's learning, it's freeing yourself from it. And it's beginning to find your place to stand and have voice and claim your life so that when you get to the end of your life, you feel like, okay, I lived at least the second half the way I meant to.
So in your experience, and I love that, and obviously it takes a lot of introspection and a lot of work. And I think we as women in middle life are willing to put in that work, right? To achieve these extraordinary outcomes. In your experience in working with all of your patients and speaking to the number of women that you do, what are some of the biggest aha moments for women when they finally find that peace and they're embracing sex on their terms, not what, they've been raised with or the shame that's been surrounded that?
Yeah.
Is it better sex?
Yes, but much better sex. But it often is also grief. right? It's a grief because you're restoring your life. So there's a grief there, and there's a liberation there, and a discovery of you. So I was a single parent for 9 years, from 37 to almost 47. And my kids were between 6 and almost 20, the whole range. Right. And so after the first couple of years, I found my feet again and I realized, okay, I'm going to be okay, blah, 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 blah. Probably 3 years into it, I decided, okay, I want to go out on a date. I don't want a partner, but I got some major healing to do. So I want to go out on dates on my terms because I need to learn about practicing voice, right? And finding out what I like and what I don't like, because I've been in a pretty terrible relationship. And so my first phase of dating, I called the boy toy phase, because it was entirely about learning on my terms about what I liked and didn't like and how to have voice about that. I didn't know, right? How often do you hear people talk about how important a boy toy phase can be for a woman? I don't ever.
Liberating, life-changing. I mean, in some
I'm a big
cases,
fan.
right?
Yeah, super important, super important. So much of me grew up during those years. Like, okay, that's BS. I like that. I don't like that. I want to be treated this way. I mean, I just learned. And then so when I started to have relationships, I continued that learning. Oh, I really like somebody who has values, who's kind, who comes from a loving family, who's great relationships with their kids, whatever. But I don't like an Eeyore. That doesn't work for me, right? I just kept learning, kept learning, kept learning. It was really a process of undoing deconstruction and reconstruction of who is Tina as a woman in the world with voice, in a world that's a patriarchal world that's pretty messed up. Right? So much of that experimentation and holding on to myself in it was really important to my becoming. And yet at the time I was teaching at a university that had a religious underpinning. So my chair knew what I was doing, but I didn't tell my dean because I could lose my job. I mean, it was a very oppressive, sexist environment for a woman. And I knew I would be treated different than the men on the campus.
I feel like that's how it always is. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you can go out and sleep with 12 girls, but if I slept with 12 guys, I would be a slut. That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
No. Or whatever the number is.
Yeah, right. And that's always been BS, and it's always been about controlling women. Patriarchy is about controlling women. So men get to have the choice and say over her life too. It's not enough that they have choice and say in their own. They have to have it over yours too. And we're seeing that to extreme levels now. We're really getting invited to see what happens when you let patriarchy and capitalism go unattended for 45 years, right?
Yeah.
This is what you get. And we always were going to get this, but nobody was willing to wake up to what was happening enough.
So let's flip the switch a little and say, how can we discover ourselves with self-pleasure? So
Yes.
fuck you. I don't need you to take care of me. I want to take care of myself. And how does that look? Like, how do we embrace our bodies and like,
yes,
even tell our partners like what we need, right? So like, you're not doing it right.
Yeah. Here's what I love. Thank you for caring. Thank you for wanting to be pleasure to me. Here, let me share with you what I love. And let's experiment. And I'll keep telling you what I like. And I really say stay focused on the positive. You know, like if it's really hurting you or whatever, yeah, go ahead and say that doesn't feel very good, but let's try this. You know, keep it focused so you get more of what you want, not just less of what you don't like, right? We want more of what you like. So yes, first know yourself, discover yourself, try lots of different things, see what you like and what you don't like. If you are with consenting adults and you are consenting to yourself, it is all fine to try and figure out. And believe me, as a sex therapist and a marriage and family therapist and whatever else I am, all the things I am, there is a much wider expression of pleasure and connection than people know and see on TV. Like that, it's just, and it always has been wider than that. So much wider than that. So whatever you like, fine, give it a shot. See what you think. And if you like it, great. You just need to find other people that would want to share that with you. You know, so yes, and yes to all that does, right? Yes, and yes to the fact that you giving yourself pleasure, sometimes that's exactly what you want and you don't want anybody in that bubble. That is fine. Great. You know, for all humans, Sometimes we want to just have an orgasm under the stars with all the ancestors around and the great big cedars, and we're in our hot tub. That's a regular for me.
That sounds
great.
like an amazing
Where's your hot tub?
party.
It's on a deck in the middle of the forest. Yeah. So that has always been good and always okay. And that is not the same thing as intimacy, because intimacy I do with an other, at least one other. Okay. And that's a whole other kind of cultivation. That's a sharing of pleasure. That's a sharing of connection. That's a sharing of a experience, right? And sometimes we long for that too. And that's fine as well. It's complicated. It's another whole human, right? We have to represent ourselves. We're going to have new things to learn in that world that maybe people tried to carve out of us growing up. But that longing for connection and pleasure with another is very human. And we see it when babies are born and they're rooting for the breast and then milk isn't there. They're not rooting for the milk. They're rooting for connection and pleasure, right? Walk down the halls of an Alzheimer's unit. People don't have memory, but they are still seeking connection and pleasure with other humans. It drives their adult children crazy, but it's real. So that longing is fine. And it's a different longing than I just want to be by myself. That longing's good and fine too, but they aren't the same.
Dr. Tina for president.
No, thank you. I do not want to be president. But I would sure love to see lots of people take this up for themselves,
You
because
would have quite the mess to clean up, my friend.
I mean, I would love to see us have communities where we fought for this for each other, and we fought for it for our children, and we learned to say, no, we're not accepting anything less any longer.
Yeah.
You know, we're not accepting what men want to do to us. We're not accepting what they want to do to our communities or to our children. We are accepting only people, men and women and non-binary people, whoever. We are accepting people who want to live with an ecology of relationship and community and caring, right? And justice and love leads the way, not this other kind of BS that we've been allowing. Because it's destroying us.
What a concept, right?
Yeah.
Love is love. You know, you've been such an extraordinary wealth of information and really just a breath of fresh air, and just have such a beautiful presence and soul about yourself. And thank you for opening up these important topics. I have to know, in all of your years of doing this, you've seen an awful lot of people, an awful lot of couples, an awful lot of women, heard some outrageous things. What are some of the weirdest or funniest things, or perhaps myths that women are hearing around sex? Can you share a couple of those with us? I mean, you've made it very clear that sex is not over and should not be over in our
Oh my gosh,
right?
no.
That's a huge myth, I think.
And in fact, there's a whole theoretical idea that came out of a therapist who was also trained as a sex therapist, who was working with people in their 7th, 8th, and 9th decades who were describing more erotic sexual experiences than anybody he was talking to in their 20s and 30s. And he started to ask the question, what's happening here? Because I know these people's bodies are not working like they did in their 20s and 30s. So why are they so describing such ecstatic experiences? So he gets into lives, and what he finds out is these people who are older have already learned that life is precious. They have buried children and friends and family members, and they are all about loving. They could care less about what it looks like, what their bodies look like. If they have somebody to love with, they are going for it for hours. And they're saying what they like and don't like. And that's why they were having incredible sexual experiences, because people who are younger haven't learned to slough off the BS yet. They're still believing all the stuff that our consumer culture is trying to sell them. And they're trying to be happy with that. And guess what? It's not making them happy. It's making them miserable, right? But they haven't gotten to the place where you guys are talking about, where midlife, where we're like, wait a minute, hold it all. None of this stuff has been true. And you start really claiming your life. And so that's why sex gets better, because you're claiming your life on multiple levels, and you're grieving and getting rid of the BS on multiple levels. And so there is a wisdom that can come. We could bring it along sooner if we were intentional, which is part of what the shameless parenting is about. We can do this, but so many people are so ignorant to what culture is actually doing to them and their families and their communities and their children that they aren't waking up, and they can't wake up until enough water's under the bridge that they're like, wait a minute, right? And they have a couple of significant losses or whatever, and then they start asking the questions. Yeah. So as far as what have I seen, do you know, to be honest, what comes to mind? I've seen so much of the same thing over and over and over again, and there haven't been very many surprises in that world. And how our culture and our histories and our families and epigenetic family messages have affected people. That has just been like listening to the same song 300 times. You're just so over it. Like there's so much of the same. But I will tell you that about 6 months ago, I was talking to a 30-something who had just started dating after lots of failed relationships where she learned a lot. She said she had just started dating somebody. She goes, I keep not having any red flags. And she said, I have to tell you that last week, after they'd been going out a few weeks, I don't know, a month or so, she said, we started talking about when we might feel ready to have sex. My jaw about falls to the ground. You were actually talking about it? Like you didn't just do it? No, we wanted to talk about it ahead of time. We both did. And do you know what he said to me? And I'm like, no. He said, tell me what you're into. Tell me what you really like. And she said, so I just told him. And I'm like, what did you tell him? Because I do know this person pretty well. And she goes, I told him I was a pillow princess and I liked pleasure to happen to me. And she goes, do you know what his response was? And I'm like, no, because I was still so shocked she did that. He said, I'm so relieved because I'm a pleasure dom. I like bringing pleasure to the person that I'm loving, that I'm making love to. And I'm like, I think you might have found your person. So there was so much about that story that was so hopeful, because these were two people that they might have identified as queer, but they were more on the bi spectrum. And so they had, both of them had dated lots of people of the opposite gender, but they were not having a typical conversation that I hear in straight relationships at all. And it just made me hopeful.
Oh, I love that. Well, we all certainly need more of you in our lives. Obviously, you have both of your books, Shameless Parenting, which I am going to run and buy. I think it's certainly something that we could utilize in our household. You have your book, Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, which I think is so fascinating. How else, Dr. Tina, can our listeners find you, have more of you in our lives, enroll in perhaps a seminar, or if you're experiencing, any sort of sexual shame or wanting more sex in your lives, how do people connect with you? Because you are pure.
Thank you. Well, you can go to my website, which is Tina Schermer Sellers, so just my name.com. And on there, I have some free downloads. I have a thing called the Sexual Reclamation Project, which is just a series of questions that helps you write an essay that allows you to examine the legacy you grew up with, and then examine whether that's the legacy you want to carry forward or if you want a different one. So it's a whole project. And I used to take my grad students through this. So I know it can be a really liberating thing to do, to commit your story to paper and see the arc of what it tells you. I also have on there a development chart that if you don't have the Shameless Parenting book, you can download that and you can see here's the common things at each age, right? But let me also say, you can get the books on Amazon, or if you're like my family and you're boycotting Amazon, you just take the titles to your local bookstore and say, could you order this for me? And they will get it for you. Okay.
The Libby app. It's wonderful. I just discovered the Libby app like yesterday. You
Perfect.
Can get your local library card and then you download the Libby app and then it imports the books over to your Kindle or your iPad or whatever. It's wonderful.
Awesome. That is so great. And so there are ways for us to get what we want to get without supporting billionaires who are exploiting our country and our world. Also, but let me just tell you and your listeners, if anyone can't afford either book and they really want it, all they need to do is DM me through Instagram, and I'm Dr. Tina Shameless, so DRTINA Shameless. Just DM me and give me your email address, and I will send you an Audible promo code so you can download that book and you can get it. So if you don't have the Libby app or there's some other reason why you're having a hard time getting the book, I don't want anybody to not get these books because they can't afford them. I'm happy to help in whatever way I can. So those are probably the easiest ways to get a hold of me, honestly. And if you're interested in learning more, I can put you in touch with an institute that I used to run that has like 40 seminars on it on different topics and stuff. And then I've got a lot of other interviews and podcasts where I talk about how to reclaim yourself and how to do this. So it's, as you can tell, my favorite thing to talk about. Huh?
Yeah, I was going to say more women and moms should be bringing your books into their book club, because think about, I mean, how it releases what you have in your childhood, how it helps open up those conversations of how to raise your children to embrace their sexuality in a positive way. I mean, it's like a win-win for all, right?
Yeah. And I have told people, if you do a book club with either one of the books and you want me to come answer questions your last meeting, if I can fit it on my schedule, I am happy to do that. And so I've done that several times. It's gone in on the last and people have all their questions. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this, happy to do that. Happy to support people's liberation and living the life they mean to live.
We should have you come out to our event that we're going to do in April, at the end of April. We'll talk to you about that. But anyways, thank you so much, Dr. Tina. I think we've all learned so much from you today, and how to reclaim yourself and speak your mind and just, shed everything that we've learned over the last decades of our lives. And
yes, exactly.
Thank
you so much for what you guys do and for all the support that you provide people who are trying to wake up and claim their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today we learned that midlife is messy, menopause may be weird, and the rules of engagement probably need to be reevaluated a little bit, but sex, intimacy, and love doesn't have an expiration date. So we love you for that. Don't forget, all of our listeners, please subscribe, leave us a review, share this episode with your girlfriends who are also wanting to explore sexuality in a whole new way. And until next time, stay classy, stay sassy, and keep those hot flashes in check. And that's a wrap on today's episode. Remember, menopause may be a wild ride, but together we've got this.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Hot Flash Health.
Stream and subscribe to us on any of your favorite listening platforms like YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
And of course, share your thoughts with us. We love hearing from our amazing listeners.
And until next time, stay sassy, stay fabulous, and keep those hot flashes in check.
Yeah, girl.
Woo!